Okay, so can everybody see the welcome to Paramook sign?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay,
Yes.
I
thank
can.
you.
Now mute.
Good. Okay, dokes. Well, welcome to Paramook 2023. And let me get also known as Parapsychology Research and Education. And this year, our topic is apparitions, hauntings, and poltergeists. The live session started on February 28th and will end on April 1st, 2023. And tell your friends we're taking registrations right up till April 1st. I want to say thank you first to the organizing team, Brian Williams, who's here, and Natasha Chisdis, who is here. Both of them are from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I especially want to acknowledge and say thank you to Lisa Coley and Anastasia Demalis, the president and executive director of Parapsychology Foundation, whose support since 2015 has been crucial to being able to bring these courses to everybody. So thank you, guys. So today we have Allison Jornlin from American Ghost Walks in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the title of her talk is The Hidden Ghost Hunter, Remembering Catherine Crowe. Allison developed Milwaukee's first haunted history tour in 2008. Since then, she has presented at paranormal conferences across the US and contributed essays and research to several popular books. Allison currently works as a professional weirdo, and boy, I am too. I'm glad to hear you say that. She researches and writes for American Ghost Walks. She also runs a fledgling YouTube channel called Paranormal Women, devoted to educating the public about female contributions to psychical research. And all you have to do is search for Paranormal Women on YouTube, and the link will be in the description.
Make sure to put quotes around paranormal women, though.
Right. that is very good advice. Otherwise, you get all kinds of things.
Right.
Right. So the abstract is today the term poltergeist is well known, but you've probably never heard of the English writer who first brought the phenomena to mainstream attention. Catherine Crowe not only compiled a staggering collection of ghost stories and other paranormal claims, but laid the foundation for future psychical research in her groundbreaking book, The Night Side of Nature. This presentation will showcase the contributions of this largely forgotten trailblazer, as well as share some colorful stories from her life and work. So let me get out of your way here, and we will get you set up. Okay, I'm going to turn off my video and you can get your things going, but I'll leave my audio on until you're ready to talk, okay?
Okay.
There you go. You don't need me.
I got it up.
Have fun. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nancy. All right. So this is a presentation about Catherine Crowe, and I hope that some of you know about her, but maybe some of you don't. So that's why I'm talking today, because I think she's such an important figure in psychical research. And before I start, though, let me just say that in my former career as an elementary school teacher, I taught fourth grade at a Native American school. And one of the things I learned from that experience is to apologize before speaking in front of your elders, because you know you can make some mistakes. And I've adopted that practice and feel it's particularly relevant on this occasion, since I'll be speaking in front of exemplars of psychical research like Nansen-Grony, and I just wanted to thank her and Brian and Natasha for this opportunity today. So I'm presenting on Catherine Crowe because throughout the years, you know, I'm very interested in psychical research, obviously. I've heard lots of declarations about male researchers in the field, referring to them as the father of this or that. But I seldom hear similar declarations about female researchers. So this is evidence, in my mind, of an imbalance in the field. If there are 4 fathers, doesn't it make sense that there would be 4 mothers as well? Otherwise, you're only getting half of what our field has to offer, and who amongst us would like to settle for such an obstructed view? So one example of this half-baked dichotomy is Charles Fort. For his 20th century cataloging of anomalies, he's been called the father of the supernatural, or the man who invented the supernatural. But long before him, there was Catherine Crowe. And it's my assertion that she should be henceforth named the mother of the paranormal. And I think this because all of us in the paranormal and parapsychological fields have been influenced by Catherine Crowe, but we probably just don't know it yet. But hopefully after today, you'll get what I'm saying, and you'll see how she's contributed, and how we're standing on her shoulders amongst the shoulders of other giants. So wanted to point out in my introductory slide here, you might see over to the left there, that very lackluster sketch of Catherine Crowe, which may not even be a picture of Catherine Crowe. We have so little about her, and it's sad that we don't have a portrait or like a painted portrait or something like that. But we do have this simple sketch, and although it doesn't matter in my mind what someone looks like, it's the content of their character. It's the quality of their contributions that matter. I think that it's helpful to have an idea of the person. So I did create, based on that only known sketch, of an image of Catherine Crowe, and she's going to speak for herself in just a moment.
My name is Catherine Crowe, authoress of The Night Side of Nature. I also investigated a haunted house in 1854, the first formal ghost hunt of the secular variety. Yet I've been largely forgotten, and there are those who still malign me, employing what is, at best, dubious reasoning, and, at worst, unabashed chauvinism. My only request is that you are unbiased by gossip and judge my work solely based on its own merits.
So that's our opening statement from Catherine herself. She didn't actually say that. I put the words in her mouth, but I tried to think of like what she would want to say to us today. Here's a little timeline of her life. So she was born into a lower class, actually. To me, it seems more like middle class, but it was lower class to start. And then her father, John Stevens, had a lot of ambitions, and was a merchant and importer. And later he owned a coffee house, which became very popular with the literati in London, and it was frequented by such luminaries as Lord Byron. And so he was able to amass somewhat of a fortune because of his successful businesses. And that, of course, comes into play a little bit later, that there was some money that would help Catherine Crowe live independently at a time when women found it nearly impossible to do that. So she was married in 1822 to John Crowe, who was an army officer. And so then that's where she gets her married name. Her birth name is Catherine Ann Stevens. Then in 1837, she fled her marriage, and she does talk in one letter to a correspondent that she was really fleeing for her life. So it was an unhappy marriage. She had given birth to a son in 1823, so just a year after the marriage, and that was her only son, William, her only child. And so she stuck with the marriage until he was old enough to go away to military school and follow in the same footsteps of his father. So in 1837, she fled London, and she went to go live in Edinburgh, Scotland, and she was able to live off the inheritance that her father had left her. So she had financial independence. And so she was living solo, and then she became a writer, started to make her living off her writing. So let's see here. Her first book was published in 1841, and originally she was a novelist, and throughout her career she was a novelist of crime and mystery fiction. And although people in our field really don't look that closely at her, maybe just because of the scandal I'll tell you about later that they don't want to associate with her, but people in the realms of literary criticism and more feminist academic writing have started to take a good look at her, and there's several papers been written, especially because her first book was The Adventures of Susan Hopley, or Circumstantial Evidence. So probably the first time that a real life crime investigation term was used. Now this came out in January of 1841, and so later that year, Edgar Allan Poe came out with the Murders in the Rue Morgue, and that's always been credited as the first modern detective story, wherein Catherine Crowe's book was a novel, not a short story, and it has many detective elements, and the detective is a female. So you can already start to see that Catherine Crowe was way ahead of her time. And it's sad that we don't know more about that, but hopefully I'll be able to remedy that situation. So in the 1840s, she was also reading a lot of information, a lot of books from German doctors and scientists. Now, although she was English, she was able to read fluently in German and in French, and this kind of made her unique, I think. And even today's standards, there's not many bilingual or multilingual researchers who are looking to see what findings are happening in other countries and then bringing them back to their own countries. Whatever findings are fascinating, and then sharing them with the larger community, making these findings, not just country specific, but internationally known. So she read widely in these different languages, and what she came upon was, oh my gosh, look at all these learned German physicians and scientists who are writing about psychic phenomena and making some astounding discoveries. And so she's like, well, I got to do something about this. So she translated in 1845 a work by Justinus Kerner, called the Seerist of Prevorst. He was a practicing physician, but one of his patients turned out to be this amazing, but unfortunately bedridden and very sickly clairvoyant. So she was like on the edge of death all the time, and this is why she got these accurate messages. Now, then in 1848, she decided, well, I have to take what these German researchers have found, and I have to apply what they've taught me to everything I can find out about psi phenomena that's going on in the UK. And that's exactly what she did in her book, The Night Side of Nature. Then let's go on to the next. Okay, so in 1854, she introduced and took part in what I believe is the first paranormal investigation. Of course, there have been people throughout the ages who've been interested in ghosts and poking around, but their efforts were largely religious in nature. They weren't just looking at the phenomenon or phenomena with a secular, more scientific view or an open view to whatever occurs. They were looking at it within a certain framework of the Almighty, and then angels, and then demons and witches. They were very influenced by that context. Whereas when Catherine Crowe went into this investigation, she was looking at it from just wonder in general, and trying to make contact with the ghosts and find out more about what it actually is. So we'll talk more about that later and give you some details. But my friend Brandon Masulo said that she introduced the single blind protocol, which we'll talk more about when we get to that point. But I loved using that lingo. So now she also, in 1854, soon after that ghost hunt, became ill. And because of some kind of nude streaking incident that may or may not have happened when she was ill, she was slandered, I would say, and her reputation took a serious hit, where people found it really easy to label her as oh, you know, see, the spirits made her crazy, she's one of those crazy ladies, and totally discredit her over something that, if it did happen, was maybe 5 minutes, because we'll explain why it seems implausible that it was longer than that. And so she went on to not, as people alleged, be put away in an asylum, but, you know, to go back to complete normalcy after her illness. And she wrote books to follow. I'm not going to focus on any of the articles or the fiction publications, just the publications that are relevant to us. So in 1859, she publishes Ghost and Family Legends, which is personal stories from friends and correspondents, but again, true ghost stories, and stories of the strange things that had happened in families. And she still had enough social clout to be invited to parties with different people in the intelligentsia or the literati, and get their family stories. And then she wrote a philosophical treatise also that year called Spiritualism and the Age We Live In. Now, she died of natural causes in 1872. And up until that point, up until at least 1871, she was still publishing nonfiction articles and on scientific topics. Like she had this fascination with seaweed for some reason, and then also she was contributing mystery stories, short stories as well, until her death in 1872 of natural causes at the age of 82. Okay, so we have a picture of her here in front of Edinburgh. And she has this.
From 1837 on, I lived an independent life in Edinburgh, making a living as a writer of crime fiction and mystery novels, featuring female detectives. I also wrote one of the first werewolf horror tales. This was quite unusual for a woman of my time. I became interested in psychical research in the 1840s from reading the works of contemporary German physicians and scientists who were making amazing discoveries.
Okay, so now let's talk about her related to paranormal investigation. Now, there are some excellent books out there. Like there's a book that Brandon Masula told me about, which I read by Tim Prassel, not this one, but another one, where he talks about who he thinks the first ghost hunters are. And to me, I would argue with him because, again, they are not investigating in the same way we are investigating today. They were looking into cases, and sure, they were interviewing people and, sometimes staying, on a ghost hunt to like try to capture whatever it was, but they were doing so from a religious perspective. They wanted to capture information of the treachery of witches, or they wanted to exorcise whatever demon was on the scene. They weren't actually interested in really pondering what these phenomena could be beyond their own religious worldview. Now let's talk a little bit about the first ghost hunt. So in 1854, and then she later writes about this in Ghosts and Family Legends. So in 1854, she finds out that there is this house that is not able to be rented. It's having a lot of trouble where the owner of the house can never seem to keep it rented. People flee, renters flee, and they just can't stay long. And so she finds this out from the owner of the property, and then she gets permission from him to go investigate. And so she puts together a team of fellow truth seekers, including a lawyer, a clairvoyant, and just a lady. So there's a group of people, and so this team goes to the house, and they go at midnight, but they don't tell the clairvoyant what's up. They just say to her, well, we're thinking of renting this house and we want to know if it's a good buy. But I think she might have been a little bit tipped off by the fact that they were going in the dark of night. But that aside, she was trying to use that blinding protocol. So interestingly enough, though, this clairvoyant only functioned under what we would call hypnosis today. So I think there was a doctor who also went along to hypnotize her. And so they put her under hypnosis, and then they asked her opinion of whether they should buy the house. And she tells them, oh no, 2 people were murdered here and they will trouble you if you buy this house. So they proceed, to try to make contact with the spirit, but they're not really able to do so. They do experience some strange manifestations, but Catherine herself is not very impressed. Whereas, I know how it goes when you go on paranormal investigations. Usually nothing happens. But to her, she was, still a rookie in that sense and expected something big to happen, apparently. So, but when investigators were sitting quietly in the home, they did hear an unexplained metallic sound at the door, which sounded like the striking of 2 pieces of iron and seemed to have no explanation. It just came out of nowhere. And then the clairvoyant reports that she's seeing waves of light emanating from the floorboards in about 2 to 3 second intervals, and nobody can see that except that the clairvoyant takes Catherine Crowe's hand, and she is able to see them then. And she's amazed that she can see the lights raising in intervals. But she later regrets that she didn't have the forethought to think, well, I should really test this, and I should stop holding her hand and have everybody else on the team consecutively hold her hand and see whether or not they can see the same light phenomenon. Now, Crowe also sees an extremely vivid spark erupt in the middle of the room, and describes it as a brilliant white diamond of light. Now, afterward, the investigators assemble. They leave the location, and they share what happened to them. And one other person, I believe it was the lawyer, said that he actually saw that same bright spark of light, and she had confirmation in a sense that what she saw maybe had some objective reality. And they described it as being so bright, like an oxyhydrogen light was their specific description of it. Now, to me, her approach really demonstrates that she was trying to be scientific about it. So one might expect that because she did this at such an early time in 1854, that there'd be more written about this. And one of my favorite sites, the Psi Encyclopedia, unfortunately, I noticed that although Crowe is cited in other articles, there's no entry for Catherine Crowe. And she's cited in all these other articles, but why isn't she important enough to be remembered? Now, I have reached out to the editor, and Nancy's going to help me with this. But yeah, we're going to remedy that situation and make sure she has her own entry. And that'll be some small step in the right direction to getting Catherine her props. We have to respect her for her contributions. Now, also on the Sci Encyclopedia is this guy, Joseph Granville. And I mentioned Tim Prassel before, who wrote a book recently about the earliest ghost hunters. Not this one, I have the other book on Kindle. But he talks about Joseph Glanville here as the first ghost hunter. Now, this is a problem for me because, well, I'll tell you in just a second here. So you can see here on the slide that, you know, he's given credit, as he should be, for being one of the first intellectuals to take a scientific interest in paranormal claims. And then also Harry Price said that, here we go, should be called the father of psychical research in Britain. But my question is what he was doing really psychical research? I know that he investigated the drummer of Tedworth, which he called the demon of Tedworth, and it would conclude it was brought about by witchcraft. Now, he did go there, he did interview witnesses, he did stay in the home so that he could experience the phenomena, but is just doing that psychical research. It's kind of the analogy here is, okay, lots of people are interested in the paranormal. There's teenagers that go legend tripping, and they walk through cemeteries, and they go to legendary places where witches maybe congregated at some point. Is that psychical research? So this is what I feel like in this case, where he did want there to be a serious inquiry into supernatural happenings, which is great. But he wanted that because he was striking out against atheism, and he wanted to prove the supernatural, to prove God, to show that atheism was not the best course of action if you're an intellectual, because there's all this evidence to the contrary, that can't be explained. And so yeah, I mean, he did call for the same approaches to be used as were used in science, and he wanted to compile a natural history of the supernatural, like do a survey of all the weird stuff that was happening, and try to understand it, which is great. However, there's a dark side to him too. And, I wonder what he'd say about this idea that he was a psychical researcher.
But in defense of truth, I sought to convince readers of the malefic power of the witches.
So he was really into the idea that witches are real and we got to do something about it. So his books are known to have deeply researched, or deeply influenced rather, Cotton Mather and his Wonders of the Invisible World, which was written to justify the Salem witch trials. So there are many that believe that his work to popularize the idea that witches were real, and that satanic power was out there that could seduce people, and that there's a lot of tormenting of innocent victims, that may have influenced the persecution of witches, including the Salem witch trial. So we definitely need to keep that in mind. Now, let's talk about who actually wrote a natural history of the paranormal, or attempted to, and that was Catherine Crowe. We talked a little bit about her 1845 translation of the Seerest of Prevorst, which was a book by a doctor named Justinus Kerner. And as I mentioned before, in his practice, he came upon this very ill woman, and in the process of taking care of her from over 3 years, from 1826 to 1829, he experienced, just by being there and medically tending to her, some astounding predictions that she made, and some he had paranormal experiences of his own that he didn't know how to explain. So when Catherine read this, she's like, "I've got to be translated into English," and that's what she did. And then from his work, and also the work of other German scientists and doctors, she was like, well, I have to apply what they taught me in their books, and try to make this huge volume of stories that will cover as many paranormal phenomenon as many paranormal phenomena as I can find. So the night side of nature is not just ghosts, although it's so many types of ghosts, and she does try to classify each type of ghost and talk about their purpose. But beyond that, there are, of course, poltergeists, which we'll talk about in a little bit, demonic possession, doppelgangers, and concepts which we now call OBE and NDE. She was looking into her area of the world, the UK, for examples, and also beyond. And then she was also looking towards trying to incorporate whatever she knew about other cultures, to use as much cross-cultural data as she could find. But the whole idea of the book is to put these extraordinary accounts together and then get scientists to look at them and take them seriously. So in a lot of ways, she fulfilled Joseph Glanville's vision, and this book became extraordinarily popular because it hit right at the time when spiritualism was coming across the pond, and just starting in England. We know 1847, the Fox sisters in New York, but it took a while for that to get across the Atlantic and start influencing the British population. So, but what was interesting, so fortuitous, is that her book hit right at the time when spiritualism was starting to come in. So I mentioned Justinus Kerner, and so here is one of the German authorities that she was reading. She had a lot of them, so this is just a smattering of what was going on in Germany, which is like, when you see this, you'll be like, wow, all these people were active at this time, and active in paranormal research. And the sad thing is a lot of their books are still untranslated.
I wrote about the clairvoyant Friederike Haufe in my book, The Series of Prevorst. I was also a practicing doctor and the scientist who discovered botulism.
So these people who Catherine Crowe was reading and reporting on and being influenced by were no slouches. So, this guy was, Justinus Kerner, he was kind of a Renaissance man. He was also a poet, but he was a practicing doctor, and he was the first scientist to identify the botulinum toxin, which we know today is, one of the deadliest poisons out there. Okay, now Heinrich Jung Stilling, he was another one of her sources.
I was a doctor who completed 3,000 cataract surgeries in my career. I also wrote the book A Theory of Spirit Studies in Nature. I believe it was the duty of the living to help the dead person.
Yeah, so this is the guy who might have come up with the idea of unfinished business. I'm not sure about that, but 1808 is pretty early, and so there's this idea of that the living really need to help the dead to pass on and resolve any unfinished business that they have. And he wrote that book, A Theory of Spirit Studies in Nature, although I'm not sure if it's been translated. I had to take the German title and figure out what it said because it wasn't very clear in Google Translate. But this is just going to show a lot of these people that I'm telling you about today. A lot of their works in this area of psychical research still haven't been translated into English. So who knows what goodies are in there. Now, he was also a pioneering surgeon, and he really gained fame for successful cataract removal surgeries, and he performed some 3,000 of them in his career. Okay, so Carl Eschenmayer, another medical doctor and philosopher. Now, he researched magnetism, which so we have mesmerism, we have magnetism. These are all precursors to what we know as our modern day variant, which is hypnosis. So he researched hypnosis and demonic possession, and he wrote many books about paranormal subjects, but I couldn't find any of them that are translated at this point.
I was a medical doctor who later researched and wrote about cases of magnetism and demonic possession.
Okay, and this is another doctor, Dr. Joseph Ennemoser.
I was a professor of medicine who studied mesmerism. I became a magnetic physician. I wrote a book entitled History of Magic.
Yeah, so he's got this book, History of Magic. I can't wait to read it. I have not read it yet, but that one has been translated. So I'm really excited because it mentions all kinds of phenomena that I'm interested in, even fairies. So he, again, this was somebody who was a physician, but he thought, you know, wow, I'm really seeing these dramatic results with animal magnetism or mesmerism. You know, they were using hypnosis to help patients feel better. Okay, I don't even I gotta tell you, these Germans have such long names. I kind of try to shorten them as much as possible. Let's just call him Dr. Schubert, shall we? So let's see what Dr. Schubert has to say.
I was a doctor and naturalist who lectured on magnetism, clairvoyance, and dreams. I wrote the book Views from the Dark Side of Science. My views on dream symbolism later influenced Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung.
All right, so he was interested in science in terms of the natural world and wrote histories of the natural world. But he was also interested in a lot of the topics we're interested in, like hypnosis and clairvoyance and dreams. And I'm excited by the title. I think he must have really influenced Catherine Crowe, because his book is very close to her book's name, The Night Side of Nature, which is like the dark side of the moon, you know, the side of nature that is just out of view. And there might be lots of interesting things going on there that we don't understand. And so he wrote a book with a very similar title, Views from the Dark Side of Science. Now, let's talk about poltergeists, because that's one of my favorite subjects. And it's also a subject that, oops, sorry about that. It's also a subject that we're focusing on for our presentations. So, so for Crowe, there were a variety of types of ghosts, but poltergeists to her were outliers that didn't seem human. And polts wreak all kinds of havoc. As you know, innumerable items fly about, clothes are shredded, people are sometimes even beaten by unseen hands. Worse yet, sometimes mysterious fires erupt. You also have water coming out of nowhere. I mean, it's a home insurance kind of nightmare. So over the centuries, such destructive and often odd and inexplicable antics have been blamed on everything from demons to fairies to witches. And you know, today, of course, the most popular view is to talk about, like, it's an agent, it's a stressed teenager. But that was also an evident thread of hypothesis in Crowe's time. So it's just interesting, though, that there's been, you know, so many people with so many different views of, you know, what these things are for so long. But what doesn't change is the nature of the phenomena. It's, you know, the nature of poltergeist manifestations, where they break everything in the house and they set things on fire, and it's kind of like some kind of spiritual temper tantrum, if it is like human in any sense at all, or an emanated energy from a human, or, you know, she felt that she wrote that, you know, some people think it's you know, antics of some kind of satanic imp. So who knows what it is. We'll talk a little bit about the parts that she explores in her books. So what I find really interesting is that in her chapter 16, she introduces the word poltergeist into English language usage in the content, of course, but also in the title, which is The Poltergeist of the Germans and Possession. Now, in chapter 16, she defines a poltergeist as another kind of haunting, which is still more mysterious and strange, and by no means unfrequent. This is a quote. And which, from the odd sportive, mischievous nature of this disturbances created, one can scarcely reconcile to our notion of what we understand by the term ghost. So she's looking at them as, you know, some kind of outlier. Now, it's interesting to note, though, that the first place where she goes is to a human agent. So in the chapter, she reports on about 25 poltergeist cases, and then about 5 more demonic possession cases, which her German sources really feel are related. Now, so let's talk about the number one place where she goes, which is to talk about cases of electric powers. So there are electric people with some kind of psychokinesis powers or / ailments, because it doesn't always work out so well for them. So we'll go next to talking about that. And I just want to show you this page of the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, of course. The great thing about that is it shows the first instance where the word appeared in the English language. And there, at least, Crowe gets credit. So let's talk about these electrical people, which were mostly girls, but not exclusively. So there's about six cases she mentions. I'm not saying Crowe is beyond criticism, because one of the things I wish she would have done in Night Side of Nature is fully fleshed out all of these stories. So she has a lot of mentions, but there are, only certain stories that are fleshed out. And then, I'd love to see more sources. So, I could trace those sources today. And maybe some of these things, like those doctors that I just mentioned, she doesn't mention like their full name. Some of those names are kind of long, so I sympathize. But maybe these German doctors were more well known at that time. So she just mentions, Dr. So-and-so, people would know what to look up. But then today it's harder to find when you just have a last name. So, okay, let's talk about these electric girls. The original electric girl was Angeline. I believe the last name would be Coty or Coty rather than Cotton, because she was French. As I mentioned, Catherine Crowe also was fluent in French, and so she was knowledgeable about weird stuff going on in France at her time of writing as well. So this Angelique was a 14-year-old French girl who in 1846 was the center of some rather dramatic psychokinetic disturbances, and that it really caused an international sensation. So she was a peasant girl from a small village in Normandy, who exhibited some remarkable electrical phenomena, but I can't say that they're always electrical, because other things that you wouldn't expect to be electrical conductors also were affected. So she experienced these weird happenings for about 10 weeks. Now, her first manifestation took place on the evening of January 15th, 1846, when she was engaged in weaving gloves with 3 other girls. So she's doing a job, but then she notices, alarmingly, that every time she advances toward the loom, it shakes, and then dramatically like pushes away from her, as if she's repelling it in some way. And so then later on, as it progresses, furniture was also repelled by her approach, which made it really difficult for her to take a seat at any point. So then the electrical part comes in with these electrical shocks. So at times she zapped those with electrical shocks who got too close to her, and it's a question of whether that was intentional or not. But that certainly was a big part of the case, that people were getting these painful shocks. No one was electrocuted or anything like that, but it was very alarming. So because of all this attention, and her parents were of course very poor, they took her to Paris and tried to exhibit her to exploit her for what was going on for her financial benefit, and whereupon the manifestation ceased. Now, another story, as I said, there's 6 cases covered in varying levels of complexity. So another good one was there was this teenage sister of Professor Emmerich of Strasbourg, and Crowe just refers to her as Mademoiselle. Emmerich. So I'd like to see if I can find more information about her, but it's hard without all the pertinent information that you need. So she also manifested some very shocking skills, although it turned out to be more of a malady than a superpower in her case, unfortunately. So the problem originated from some kind of serious fright. So stress related, let's say, after which she fell into a deep trance. And then afterward, electricity started to build up in her body. And like throughout the day, she'd often have to relieve herself by discharging it into the environment. And sometimes she was a little mischievous about how she did it. So one day, her brother was working in another room of the house when he felt a sudden painful zap. And he went in to look on his sister, who was sick in bed. As he entered the room, she gave him a sly smile and laughed, asking, "So you felt that, did you?" So unfortunately, this electric girl would not recover and died soon after the manifestations began. So there's also many interesting, what we would call classic poltergeist cases. So one of them is the Trinity poltergeist. So in Edinburgh, in 1835, Captain Molesworth rents a house from a Mr. Webster. Now, one of his daughters had unfortunately just died. Maybe that's what precipitated the move to a new place. And he had to take care of a poor, sickly invalid daughter. So he had lost one daughter, he has another daughter, and so he takes her to live in these new digs, and everything's fine at first. And then there's all these knockings and scratchings and poundings throughout the night that are, just beyond the wainscoting. And also there's other manifestations, like, sometimes the mattresses just like pop up in the air by themselves, and, throw themselves out the bed. So Captain Molesworth becomes quite alarmed, and he wants to know, like, what is going on. He wants to investigate. So he chooses a very destructive way to investigate, in taking a crowbar and lifting up the floorboards. He's trying to find any evidence, like, are there bones, of someone that was killed here, and is that what's causing the manifestations? Is it animal infestation? So he pulls up the floorboards. I don't think Mr. Webster's gonna like that. And then he also gets frustrated at one point and discharges his firearm into the wainscoting, and he drills holes in the wainscoting, and all kinds of things to try to figure out what is behind there causing the strange happenings. Now, people in the community are also interested, so they come over, but they want to test, and they think, oh, it's his invalid daughter that's doing this. So they actually stuff her in a burlap sack and tie her up. Not a good idea, since maybe the rough treatment contributed to her death soon after. But anyway, Mr. Webster takes Captain Molesworth to court and is able to extract damages for all his less than responsible, maybe, investigation by tearing up Mr. Webster's house. So here's another favorite one of mine, because it involves an 18th century Methodist figure, John Wesley. So John Wesley grew up to become the founder of the Methodist Church. And when he was a child, though, in his home, there were strange manifestations. It didn't last long, just about a month, from Christmas Day 1716 through January. So his childhood home at that time was plagued with regular strange noises. There were footsteps walking in the rooms upstairs, and then they heard footsteps running down the stairs, and then the whole thing escalated into some rattling and thundering with the walls shaking in every room of the house. And then there was also these loud sounds like the blowing of an invisible horn that occurred with ear-splitting decibels. So there happened to be 15 children in the family at the time, and John was one of them, and he was quite frightened by the manifestations, but they did manage to come up with a nickname for the poltergeist, and they called them Old Jeffrey. But like I said, it only lasted for a month, and then it stopped. Like quite often with poltergeist cases, they're a very short duration, thankfully, because in some situations, like the ones I'm going to tell you about right now, if they last too long, they kind of ruin all your stuff. So especially back in the day, when people did not have much, they did not live in the opulence that we take for granted today. Having like all their crockery and chattels and everything in the house wrecked, could put them in a dangerous situation for surviving the winter, for example. So one of the earliest cases she deals with has been called the Devil of Glenluce, and that's in Scotland. So this poltergeist is affecting the house of Gilbert Campbell starting in November 1654 until April that year, or April of the next year, and then starting again in July. So he's Presbyterian, and he goes to his minister to help him, and then they convene what's called, something I never heard of before, a day of humiliation in the community, where everyone atones for their sins. This has been another view of poltergeist cases, that it's some kind of punishment from God for some sin that was either perpetrated by you or the community. And so you have to repent. So that's what these days of humiliation were, where you fasted, maybe you wore a hair shirt. I'm not sure about that, but that sounds like a good way to atone. Maybe there's some flagellation. That's an old favorite. But the point is that the whole community would take on this act of contrition to try to stop this manifestation from destroying this guy. So that did seem to help, and they got a break from October of 1655 until April of the next year, when the activity picked up again. But it finally did stop in the winter of 1656 for good. So the manifestations that nearly destroyed the entire family included stone throwing, the spirit was speaking to them. That's interesting. It reminds me of like the Bell Witch, for example, in the US. And then there was a destruction of nearly all their family possessions, and their food was even spoiled. So they're trying to eat, and their food just goes moldy and rank, just like they have nothing to eat. Everything they prepare immediately goes rancid. And then this is maybe the worst. I'm not sure about that, but so besides the destruction of all their possessions, the clothes that they're wearing on their backs are also cut to pieces as they're wearing them on their bodies. So thankfully, like I said, the day of humiliation gave them a bit of a respite, and then finally that winter, that next year, it stopped completely. But there was another case similar to that in 1695 in Ringcroft, somewhere in the UK, I don't know, Ringcroft in Kirkcudbright in the year 1695. So this affected the Mackey family, and it went on from so it was the same kind of thing, the same kind of destruction of their home and property. And it lasted between February and May 1st of that year, 1695. And a day of humiliation was called for them as well, but unfortunately it didn't seem to have any effect. But they had a lot easier time than the Gilbert Campbell family, who were dealing with the devil of Glenluce. All right, now what is the deal with this idea that demonic possession is associated with poltergeist? So what's interesting is, although Catherine Crowe wants to take a sustained, she wants to investigate these things scientifically, but she comes, from a world where people are looking at these things very, still in her lifetime, very religiously. So, she does explore these ideas, like, well, could it be a demon in some cases, or some kind of spirit involved, like, Guy Lyon Playfair, for example. He had an interesting idea, because he was like, okay, there's an agent, a poltergeist agent, usually this teenager that has all these, this energy coming off of him. And so he described, like, the energy balls that were coming off of them to be kind of fun for spirits. Like, they'd see this ball of energy just laying around like a football, and of course they'd kick it. And so maybe that is part of what is going on in some of these cases. So now the German researchers of Catherine's time had begun to associate poltergeist activity with demonic possession, since they seem to be the first sign of the supernatural in such cases. So there'd be a poltergeist outbreak, and then someone in the family would become possessed. So today there are some people that still believe this, that there's a period of demonic oppression where poltergeist type of hijinks can happen, and that can be a stage before possession. So because of their association with poltergeist cases, Catherine reports on 8 additional poltergeist or possession cases, and symptoms she recorded include, speaking in a different voice, frightful convulsions, blasphemy and obscenity, knowledge of what is secret or the future, vomiting of extraordinary things, one of my favorites, pins, hairballs, just bad nails, bad stuff. So, and this is similar to what the Catholic Church uses today in its evaluation of whether someone needs an exorcism or not. The 4 signs of possession that the Catholic Church looks at, similar to what Catherine Crowe talks about in her book. Unnatural physical abilities, such as extraordinary strength, knowing the unknowable, so psychic information, aversion to sacred objects, which might be easy to fake, but not so much these other ones. And then lastly, speaking or understanding unlearned languages. So now the featured cases in chapter 16 of The Night Side of Nature cover adults and children. Now, one physician was studying a 34-year-old peasant in 1830, and she suffered with convulsions and a strange voice speaking through her, terrible fits of maniacal laughter, blasphemy, cursing, barking, and screeching. And worst of all, she couldn't eat. So every time she would try to eat, like the possessing demon would start to contort her body in horrible ways and turn the spoon around. She couldn't even get the food into her mouth, and it also caused her to injure herself through violent falls and other abuse. Plus she was pregnant, but somehow she got through that and had a healthy child. Now, however, this is interesting and because it deals with all the poltergeist cases that Catherine Crowe wrote about in The Night Side of Nature in chapter 16. She says that, well, let me just back up here and say, she doesn't mention the Catholic Roman rites of exorcism at all, or even the Protestant practice of deliverance. So these people, all these people she talks about, these eight cases, were cured through magnetism. So the doctor was able to cure the doctors were able to cure these people through using hypnosis. And she's, in her opinion, other remedies were more useless than nothing. So I just thought that was interesting because you don't these days hear too much about poltergeist being associated with demonic possession. Now, as you can tell, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because the Night Side of Nature, as I mentioned, is 450 some pages, and it deals with, like I said, twin telepathy, shared dreams, doppelgangers, every kind of ghost, OBE, ND, you name it, it's in there. Why don't we know of her? And it's probably because a scandal that erupted in 1854, soon after that ghost hunt that she went on.
Wanted author Catherine Crowe for over 150 years. You may remember Catherine Crowe as the investigator who conducted the first paranormal investigation. She is also the author of arguably the most popular book on the paranormal in history, The Night Side of Nature. Although Catherine Crowe's work has been largely forgotten today, she's the reason that you know the word poltergeist. Although she made significant contributions to paranormal study, you may not know about Catherine Crowe today because of a scandal that still overshadows her legacy. It involves an incident in 1854 that is at best exaggerated and at worst largely fabricated by mean-spirited masters of 19th century snark. Rumors began to circulate in early March of 1854, alleging that Catherine Crowe had been found wandering the streets of Edinburgh near her residence. She was out of her mind, and most shocking of all, naked. As the story goes, she was locked away in a madhouse. Several versions have surfaced over the years, ascribing various kooky details to explain her nudity, such as the idea that spirits had duped her into believing she was invisible. Let's separate fact from fiction. Catherine Crowe most likely did not look like this. She was 64, so she may have looked more like this. This is what we know for sure. Evidence suggests that it was none other than Charles Dickens who first spread these rumors, at least in writing. In a letter to the Reverend James White, dated March 7th, 1854, he has this to say.
Mrs. Crowe has gone stark mad and stark naked on the spirit-rapping imposition. She was found t'other day in the street clothed only in her chastity.
On March 9th, Dickens wrote another letter to his friend Emile de la Rue, stating,
There is a certain Mrs. Crowe, usually resident in Edinburgh. She was a medium and an ass. And I don't know what else. The other day she was discovered walking down her own street in Edinburgh, not only stark mad, but stark naked too.
In April, when the story hit the press, it was no surprise that it first appeared in The Zoist, a publication edited by Dr. John Elliotson, a friend of Charles Dickens.
A well-known authoress has gone stark mad and stark naked on the spirit rapping. She was found the other day in the open street as her mother bore her. She is now in a madhouse.
Total Dickens move.
Many writers have repeated this questionable account for more than 150 years. These writers retold the story largely verbatim, without question, or asked the wrong questions. The question is not, was Catherine Crowe naked in public? Who cares? The question is, why did Charles Dickens and John Elliotson resort to such a scornful ad hominem attack? Well, for that, you need to know that Dr. John Elliotson was a prominent mesmerist. Mesmerism, or animal magnetism, as it was once called, was a controversial practice. Today, we call it hypnosis, a modernized variant of mesmerism. Charles Dickens, as it turns out, was a big fan of mesmerism and even experimented with it on his friends. In 1854, the popularity of mesmerism was challenged by the newer spiritualist fad. As a result of this perceived threat, the Zoist, a mesmerist publication, did its best to portray spiritualists as misguided dupes who were often driven mad by their obsession. When talk about Catherine Crowe's mad exposure, as her friend Robert Chambers described it, came to Dickens and Elliotson's attention, it was too good to pass up. Even though Crowe wrote in glowing terms about mesmerism in The Night Side of Nature, later she had also shown an interest in spiritualism. A scandal about the foremost paranormal author succumbing to the evils of spiritualism is perhaps just what beleaguered mesmerists thought they needed to win back the spotlight. It was too late, of course, because the concept that the spirits of the dead are all around us had captivated the public, and at that time, there was no way to defeat the burgeoning popularity of spiritualism. When she saw the allegations in the Zoist, a friend of Catherine Crowe's, activist Sophia de Morgan, tried her best to set the record straight by writing Dr. Elliotson in a letter to the editor. She explained that Catherine Crowe
did not perceive the feverish attack coming on, and in consequence was seriously delirious for 2 days. The attack was removed by a very simple dose of medicine, but in the meantime, some of her friends, believing her to be permanently insane, had her brought up by a night train to Hanwell. Dr. Connolly soon saw that she was not a fit inmate for this place, and assisted her in extricating herself.
This unfortunately only resulted in additional snark from Elliotson in future issues of the Zoist. But Dr. Conley, who treated Crowe, confirmed De Morgan's comments in a letter to George Combe, a mutual friend. Dr. Conley wrote of Catherine Crowe on April 2nd, 1854, summing up the case with this simple sentence.
When she came here, her delusions had passed away like a dream.
Dr. John Conley was the superintendent of the famous Hanwell Asylum and the leading mental health expert in England at the time. My search of Hanwell Asylum records revealed that although an admissions list for that time period does exist, Catherine Crowe's name is not on it. She was never actually admitted to Hanwell. But what would modern medicine have to say about Catherine Crowe's case? Instead of relying on my own judgment, I consulted an expert. Brendan Masulo is an author and parapsychologist. He's also a licensed therapist. This is what he had to say about the case.
The paranormal world know me as a parapsychologist, but actually my training, I did study at the University of Edinburgh for parapsychology. I've worked in the mental health field for approximately about 20 years, maybe 19 years. I've had all kinds of positions in the mental health field, most notably in the emergency rooms for one of the leading hospitals here in Ohio. And in the emergency room, one of my roles was to do crisis evaluations on patients. In the case of Catherine Crowe, to my knowledge, in talking with you briefly, she didn't really have any history of psychiatric issues. And I think we all believe that we'll never have sort of psychotic symptoms, but the case is delirium can happen to all of us, from a medication to sleep deprivation, to infections, to illnesses. It could happen to us, pneumonia. These are all things, changes in medications, drugs, things like that can cause delirium. There is a difference between delirium and mental health issues. I mean, delirium is basically impairment, cognitive disturbances, hallucinations, disorganized thoughts, change in personality, aggressiveness. But these things are often brought on by a medical condition. And that's what delirium is. And delirium can happen to anyone. I've seen patients in the emergency rooms who took very common medications who would present with auditory, visual hallucinations, even tactile hallucinations. The woman had felt like there were bugs crawling all over her, and she had some paranoid delusions as well. And this was all from a very common medication she was prescribed. Other cases, we would often see patients in the emergency room with a common, especially the elderly, with urinary tract infections or UTIs. These would cause sometimes delirious type symptoms, confusion, disorganization, agitations, hallucinations. And, the causes of delirium, I wasn't a medical guy, I'm not diagnosing it, but from my experience working with ER physicians and psychiatrists, oftentimes they would have to rule out if someone presents with hallucinations or delusions or manic behavior, disorganized thoughts, all these types of things. One of the things the ER does is really parcel out what's going on. And it doesn't always have to be mental health or schizophrenia. Delirium is another possible reason. From everything that I've read and seen, it doesn't seem like insanity. It seems like she had delirium. I don't understand why anyone would not believe that when she says it. If she doesn't have any previous history of it and no history afterwards, it seems likely that it was an isolated incident of delirium. And it was treated. Once she was better medically, she didn't have any of these episodes again.
I have been for some time suffering from chronic gastric inflammation. I was taken ill on the 26th of February. And was certainly for 5 or 6 days, not more, in a state of unconsciousness. During this aberration, I talked of the spirit trapping, and fancied spirits were directing me because I was writing on the subject. But I was not, and am not, mad about spirits or anything else.
I think it's fair to say that whatever happened in 1854, we can put it to rest. All reliable accounts show that it was a short-lived episode, most likely due to physical illness. Catherine Crowe would live for another 22 years without incident. She continued to write thoughtful articles and books, including Ghost and Family Legends and Spiritualism and the Age We Live in, both published in 1859. During the making of this video, I realized that descriptors such as mad, crazy, insane are not medical diagnoses. These adjectives are put downs. Today, we realize that whether or not a person is mentally ill does not determine their value. We value individuals based on their contributions to society and the quality of their work. Let's value Catherine Crowe by reading and appreciating her groundbreaking work, which laid the foundations for parapsychology and paranormal study as we know it today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.
Okay, so I hope that you all heard that, but it just really was surprising to me that it's more than 150 years after Catherine Crowe's death, and she's still being plagued by what may or may not have happened. And if it did happen, it was very short-lived, and it was probably due to fever. I mean, who hasn't heard of people driven mad by fever and running out into the cold air because they're burning up? Well, I gotta share personally that I'm in my 50s now, and so I'm starting to experience the hot flash. So I certainly sympathize with the idea of running out outside, even during the winter, in the nude, although I've restrained myself. I need to say that it is implausible, though, that Catherine Crowe was naked out in Edinburgh in February. If you know anything about Edinburgh, I mean, it's quite cold, especially in February. You wouldn't want to spend too long outside. Now, the other thing is the wild details that are ascribed, like in Dickens' version, the spirits were telling her she was invisible, and she had to hold a handkerchief in one hand and a visiting card in the other, and she got them mixed up, and that's why she was naked. And she couldn't deal with anything black at that point, like, so the coals that were put into the stove were a problem. There's just like too many details that make it seem made up. And then on top of that, there's other people who have written their version, saying that it was actually Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary who was telling her to do this, and that if she would go out into the open air like that, she would I don't know, bring about world peace, stop all humanity's problems, something crazy like that. So you can tell by the variation, and by the idea that that it's either or, you're crazy and then that's it, they put you away, and that just it doesn't match the facts. But the story's so good, people love scandal, that I can't believe it's going on even today. And so I love Mike Dash. He's a great folklorist and writer, and he has this article up there which is still causing trouble, written in 2010. And I put his conclusion up there. We'll deal with his conclusion on the next slide, but he talks about what happened, and then here's the bottom of the page. So he takes Dickens' letters, her admission that she was sick, and so then he goes with what Edinburgh publisher Robert Chambers had to say, that she was, he was echoing that she had to be rescued from this terrible mad exposure, as he calls it. And who knows in 1854 what really qualified as naked. She could have been out there in her bloomers. So scandalous. Anyway, the point is, he is relying heavily on what Chambers said. So interestingly, Chambers might not be the best source, because Catherine didn't exactly fit his idea of the ideal woman.
Nina, my own daughter, wrote of me that I do not admire women with minds.
So that's kind of a problem with Catherine Crowe. She definitely makes her mind known. So this is the most troubling part of what Mike Dash wrote. Catherine Crowe, mad and naked. So a Scottish jury might return the verdict of not proven, but the balance of probabilities are this Welsh one finds her guilty as charged. Like, what exactly is she guilty of? You know, did she kill somebody? No, she got sick and something happened that, you know, was a breach of protocol. I think we can let it go. But when people talk about Catherine Crowe, I had a friend of mine just mention it the other day on Twitter, and he was like, what do you think of when you think of Catherine Crowe? And a very well-known folklorist that I have admired in the past, the first thing she came upon was saying, oh, you know, she was in the nude, blah, blah, blah. And this overshadows all her other work. You know, just all the books that she wrote, you know, mystery novels, detective stories where women are the lead in the 1840s. And, you know, all this incredible work amassing these accounts and imploring people, especially scientists, to take a critical look. You know, at least Colin Wilson, he wrote a great book on the supernatural and was a wonderful, prolific writer. You know, he once repeated the rumor, but then he changed his mind and he came out with the Colin Wilson Library of the Paranormal, and this is one of the books he put out. And he said that she really, the Night Side of Nature was the first sustained effort to take these phenomena seriously and look at them in the spirit of science, and that she laid the groundwork for what the Society for Psychical Research did later. And I just think she needs to be recognized for that, and not something stupid, which is really something that is done to marginalize women, to just say they're crazy, like the whole idea of the crazy cat lady today. Because someone's lonely and has a lot of cats, we blame it on them instead of society for not taking care of older women. Okay, so then let's talk about this. So this was actually even more recently, 2021. As I said, you know, this year, one of my folklorist heroes smeared Catherine Crowe when she was asked what she thinks of when she thinks of Catherine Crowe on Twitter. And she cited Mike Dash as her source. And also Jan Bonson, who wrote a book about murder houses of Edinburgh, and has a past as a physician himself. He wrote about her Trinity poltergeist case, and what was alarming is this. So she writes about something that he wants to write about. The only reason he knows about it is because of her, and so he had to put this in. Since Mrs. Crowe is not the most reliable of authors, what gives you that idea? So he's saying she's not the most reliable of authors. She's not a critical thinker. But let's examine whether he's a critical thinker. Let's look at these claims. So she's observed walking naked through the Capitol. All we have is rumors that support that, not anything that is really passes muster. And here's the reason. Oh, we know the whole rationale. She thought she was invisible. And then a stint at Hanwell Asylum followed. Now we know her friends panicked and took her there. But as Mike Dash says in his 2010 article, he didn't have a chance to check the admission records. Well, I did have a chance, and she's not in there. And then you have John Conley's letter saying that, hey, she was fine. We gave her some medicine and released her because she's not mentally ill. So it just shows you that, you know, I think Jan's right. You should always check your sources and double check. no matter who the person is. But to just smear her like that she's not reliable because of some rumor, why is the rumor so much more reliable? This just seems to me a problem that has been overlooked. So I have his address there because although Mike Dash has been very nice, and he says he does certainly plan to revise his blog article, and he knows about my research, and he's been very contrite about it and regrets what he wrote, but he's busy, so he hasn't revised it yet. But I sure hope he will soon, because people keep using him, including Jen Bonson, as their source. And they don't look any further. They're like, well, if Mike Dash says it, and Mike Dash is a great researcher, but we all make mistakes, and not everything's going to be our best research. And I would say that's the case for the blog entry that he made. So again, if we're going to be skeptical of claims, let's be skeptical of all claims. Now, as Brandon said in the video, she didn't show any signs of mental illness previously, and all her writing, it's excellent. It's ahead of its time. It's very clear-eyed. And so then, she has her episode, which lasts for, like 5 or 6 days, as she said, and then she's fine. That is not mental illness. That's something else. And then she writes 2 more books which are relevant to us. She writes many more things in the area of fiction and nonfiction, but they're not relevant to our area of study. So anyway, he pointed out that she didn't have any mental illness afterward, which she did not. And I also want to point out that this delirium idea really helped me this holiday when an elderly relative took very ill, and we had her in the hospital, we had her in rehab centers, and she was acting like she lost her mind, and the rest of the family was ready to put her in a home. And of course they're thinking Alzheimer's, dementia, her mind is gone, that's it. And because I had talked to Brandon, I knew about UTI infections, I knew about delirium. And so I talked to the medical staff, and she indeed had a UTI. And once they found the right combination of antibiotics, we had her back. She's just the same woman that she always was. Same with Catherine Crowe. So delirium exists, and it's scary. Okay, so one thing I didn't know about when I made that video with Brandon is I didn't realize that there was a thing where during the 1800s, a lot of men, when the women in their lives became inconvenient, tried to declare them insane and get them locked away in an asylum. So there's this great article that was published in the Dickens Quarterly, and it's about Catherine Crowe, it's about Charles Dickens and perceptions of female insanity, which is still too easy to make an allegation today and totally dismiss and marginalize someone. So what's the gist of what she was talks about here? She does talk about there is a friend of Charles Dickens that was successfully able to put his wife away for mental illness. And so he starts with Catherine Crowe making such allegations as insanity public, and then later when his wife becomes inconvenient because he's having an affair with a younger actress, he attempts to get her committed to an asylum. So there's academic information from letters that show that he was actively trying to do this, and thankfully the mental health professional he approached said no way, and of course then Charles Dickens hated him and wrote terrible things about him after first loving him. So yeah, we really need to rethink our ideas of Charles Dickens. So I know I'm running long here, sorry about that. I hope this has been enjoyable for you. Here's my concluding statement.
My object is to suggest inquiry and stimulate observation, in order that we may endeavor, if possible, to discover something regarding our psychical nature, as it exists here in the flesh, and as it is to exist hereafter out of it. If I could only induce a few capable persons, instead of laughing at these things, to look at them, my object would be attained, and I should consider my time well spent.
And I know here today, with you guys, we've done that for Catherine Crowe. You've listened, you didn't laugh, and you're taking these things seriously and studying them. She would be glad to see what you're doing today. And then one last thing, we have my plug for, if you like this kind of content, I put them together in YouTube videos about female researchers in paranormal studies, psychical research, etc. So you might want to check out youtube.com/paranormalwomen, or you can search in the search bar, but put quotations around paranormal women, and you can see a lot more such content like this.
Please subscribe to youtube.com/paranormalwomen. And tell your friends and correspondents.
Even Catherine thinks you should do it. All right, and then lastly, here's my contact information. Do not be afraid to reach out. Thank you very much.
This was really wonderful, and I was ready to be delighted beyond belief with this. So I just think it's just great that you've done this, and I also like that you've got this corroboration from I think it was Jane who said, I knew it was admin who said, I think that Mr. Dickens is a misogynist, and I love that you had that article, published in Dickens Quarterly, getting across that yes, the old guy wasn't happy, and I would imagine that because of the popularity of her writing, that would also infuriate somebody who didn't think women shouldn't be heard, only seen but not heard, like a good child, right?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think it was just a wonderful thing, and her writing is so good, and I had forgotten, because it's a long time since I read this, I had forgotten how many of these individuals from Germany she was reviewing, and how different and what a wide net she was casting for the types of phenomena that she reviewed. So it's just a marvelous book. One of the things I think that's really interesting is back in the day, and I think I mentioned this to you when we were doing the practice, was that Alan Gould, who's basically the king of his history of psychical research, had said something to Corliss and I at one point in the 90s about how this was one of the most reprinted book that had ever been, and was probably in more editions than almost every other thing out there. And you were seeing as, and I like that you called it this way, you were seeing a secular point of view, a way of looking at the phenomena that was scientific and aimed for a rational, but also open to paranormal kind of understanding of the phenomena. And it is too bad that she got sick and decided, okay, we're not going to do this middle of the night stuff anymore, if that's what happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much that how
they were connected or not,
but certainly, like if you do something and then you are just destroyed, your reputation is destroyed like that, maybe you think twice about putting yourself out there. And
Exactly.
certainly she was a target already because of her unconventional lifestyle. It's just hard that, the stigma still follows her, and, her work is not appreciated. And,
Yeah.
it seems like, I don't want to say like Science Encyclopedia is trying to avoid associations with her, but some of that I'm sure went on throughout history. Oh, she's the crazy lady, we don't want to be associated with her. But how easy that is, even today, especially if you deal in the paranormal, people already think you're crazy. And then
Yes.
and then you're a
Exactly.
woman, and you're irrational. And I mean, these things still exist today, which
Yep.
is why this is still so active. And it's just been so many years. It's just like, give her a break.
Yeah, it's almost 200 years. It's like, excuse me, how many other books from 1854 are still being read today? I just wanted to say that you have a lot of accolades in the chat box. Lizette said, fantastic presentation. Brandon, great presentation. Randy, excellent and important presentation. Janine, thank you for your presentation. I'm sure Catherine is smiling on the other side of the veil. And there's just more than that in there as well. I think well, not only did you have this marvelous set of animations and these wonderful voices speaking for her and for Glanville and some of these German guys, so it was very intriguing and engaging to watch. But also this is a great cause to have somebody who was that before her time and brave. I mean, she went back to her writing. She found people to talk about their family ghost stories. She wrote a book of philosophy, for heaven's sake. She didn't let herself stay behind that veil of shame, right? She just faced it and eventually got back out there and was as good as she was before. That's heroic, and it's lovely to find a heroine that way, to know that there was a quest there in her life that she did not back away from. So and I love that. I love that Alan Gold thought she was amazing, and I love that Carlos had his own copy of this as well, and was not at all not at all going to walk back from that, that this was a really important person. I don't, Jane, can you put down your screen, unless you had something that you're trying to get to, which is okay.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, like, I know I went really long. Sorry about that.
No.
I was afraid I wouldn't have enough.
No, I know you were, but it's great. It's great. No, it's great. It was, I mean, we that's the reason why we only have one per day, right? So that you can take the time that you need, and we can have time to talk. And I'm going to shut up. And Morgan, I know, has something to say. And if Brandon, you want to open your audio too, I will be quiet now.
I know, Allison, this was awesome. Like, this was just so informative. So thank you for putting this together. I think not so much a question, but just a add on to what you were saying. And I think, because I think this presentation was important for a number of reasons. And, when we were talking about Dickens and, the rumors that get started and whatever, we sit back and we listen to this and we think about it as something that's happening, in the 1800s and whatever. But this is social media trolling. This is what's happening now. And I think this story is so relevant, even just to like what we experience today, where you get these people. And I mean, I know you've had it happen, and I know I was probably out there about me too. But it's so interesting to see how that label of crazy, or that label of, just the gaslighting that goes on, whether it be like in this field or it happens all over the place, but that immediate label of, you're crazy, we're gonna gaslight you over an incident, or we're gonna twist it, and then we're gonna make it something else. And it's so that in and of itself, I think, is such a lesson out of this. And everything, like just everything that you were saying about, just Dickens happened to be the one guy that picked it up and started the trolling. But it's like, we see this now, and whether it be, as easy as it is to label it like, it's like, men versus women or whatever, but it's like, you see the women picking it up and doing it to other women. And it's like, what, like that toxic nature is just, it's so prevalent, like even today.
Yeah, and how does this contribute to research? I mean,
Right?
it doesn't. It's like
No.
it tears it down, and but to me, it's like the fact that this is so, it's so active right now. This feeling against, Catherine Crowe. And like, when is it gonna die? It's almost 200 years. Like, how powerful is Dickens? I mean, and you could tell just from looking at his letters and then looking at what was in this voice, that it was taken right from Dickens, because of the similarity of the phrasing. And they had been trying to badmouth spiritualism for so long. And even though Catherine Crowe loved mesmerism, she did a lot with mesmerism, it was just too good to pass up that we could smear her. And she's like kind of the poster child for, the spiritualism and today. And so they just couldn't pass it up. And like, people just cannot let it go. And they have to mention it every time that she had a breakdown.
Yeah. But again, it's like, there's the typical headline, right? Like, I mean, we could you could almost see it today if you were like scrolling through social media, and seeing like, oh, so-and-so had a breakdown, except now it's on the cover of the Star, or it's, the cover of People, or whatever. It's like, so-and-so had the breakdown, and then the next magazine picks it up, and blah, 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 and it's just, it's crazy. But it's interesting how that, like, that psychology of, that grabbing the sensationalism and then just destroying somebody. It's like, people are going to click on that before they click on, oh, hey, what's this thing about mesmerism?
Right. And well, and the fact that you could write so many books, she wrote 4 books that are wrote 3 books and translated 1 book that is relevant to us. But, she wrote so much other stuff, and was, like a leader in terms of, women writers of crime and, mystery, crime fiction and mystery novels. And, that's why, like, in literary criticism, you see her popping up and people investigating. But, I really wish, you'd see more papers written about her in our field.
Yeah.
But, how that you can have such an immense body of work, and somebody can be, oh, she was outside naked one time. Yeah. Well, I mean, did she eat a baby? I mean, like, what? Like, who cares? Yeah. She was outside naked for 5 minutes. I don't care.
Yeah, if she was at all, you know, and that's the crazy thing. Like, it's just that one. It's scary to see how, like, that one piece of whether it be true, false, whatever, like, career destroying. And it's like, and and here we are in the same, basically in the same position nowadays, where it's like, one person speaks out about something that they think is wrong, bam, they're off the table. And it's like, and she's just, I think, an early victim of what we're seeing that's become more prevalent now because of social media and stuff like that. But holy crap. Yeah. So
anyway, related to social media, that's really
well, and I think it's a good idea not to put down how powerful the social media of every single, every single era has been in crushing people. But Brandon, you got to get in there.
Well, no, I was just listening. I mean, I agree with everything. I was curious, like, she was such a prolific writer and bilingual, and obviously she grasped the science of the day, from mesmerism
Mm.
to what was going on in Germany. Did you find anything about, like, not just her education, but her inspiration for kind of going towards psi and spiritual? I don't know if she has bios in some of her books. I mean, did you find anything about that type of aspect with her?
Well, okay. I think it was basically intellectual, just that she was seeing like this groundswell of attention by learned people in Germany. And she caught notice of that, that there were, because I just had a few doctors. I don't want to put I mean, I already went long, but I just wanted to, like, you to see a few of those people that were her authorities. There were many more, and I think that was really an influence on her, that she's like, holy crap, look at what's happening in Germany. I got to tell the English speaking public about this, because I'm sure we have these kind of phenomena. Let's see if we do. So that's what I think is going on there. But there is like more of a personal story that before she was married, she got married late in life for that time, at 32. But before that, she did talk personally about having a lover, like when she was young, and he died. So there's might be some evidence that she was hoping to reach out to him, or she so that might have been like a personal reason, that she lost her first love, her true love, at a young age, and then married this other guy who she had to run away from, and so then she never had another relationship. So I think maybe that was part of it. But she was also very much an adventurer. There's things that she did beyond the first ghost hunt that shows that she was really willing to try things, and she had this very curious nature.
Okay. Yeah, it's super interesting. And anything about, like, her son, whatever happened to him? Is there any?
Well, yeah, I don't, he didn't carry on her work.
Yeah, all right.
Went into the military.
All right. Yeah, I just got curious.
She had a relationship with him, of course, but yeah, I don't know how close it was. I think towards the end of her life, he was taking care of her.
Okay.
But yeah, he didn't carry on her work, unfortunately.
Were her papers, correspondence and papers and that kind of thing, were they preserved or no?
Yes, and I've been to England to see them, and I took pictures of all of them.
Where are they? Where are they held?
They're in the Templeman Library at Kent University.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time there. Taking
not a bad place to stay. Yeah. That's a pretty good town. Yep.
Absolutely.
Goodness. Yeah. Well, it's just absolutely fascinating, and I love that. The other thing that I loved about your video on the YouTube channel was that you made that very sort of strong statement about, why are we doing this? People that have mental problems, or, even if that was what was happening, how can we feel that way about people that have been, afflicted one way or the other? And I think there's a bit of a sea change about that among maybe global populations. I'm not sure what direction we're going into, but there are people now that are willing to talk about those kinds of things. That I think of John Green, who's has OCD, and he's probably the biggest guy on YouTube and one of the earliest YouTube video maker. And he and his brother, have crash course and do the Project for Awesome and all these kinds of things. And he doesn't ever shy away from talking about what he has to do and how he feels and that kind of thing. And I think all that kind of stuff is really important. If we could at least start having empathy for people that are behaving in a different way from ourselves, instead of starting out, saying, yeah, well, they're not, it's just not helpful not to be empathetic. It's a way to kind of ruin your life in a way, because it limits you from being able to interact with people and understand people and listen to people. And, so I love that you did that.
Yeah, it's just, in and out group thing. Like, how can we put these people in the out group? What can we do to get them out of here and discredit them? Yeah, it's just what's ridiculous is I was just so thankful, Brandon, that you were willing to do that with me, because the ridiculous thing is that people keep repeating a rumor. And it's like, oh, this has medical implications, doesn't it? We're talking about mental health, aren't we? And nobody is like, well, maybe we should talk to somebody who might know something about mental health. And it's just like, why did it take so long for somebody to even think of that?
But the lack of empathy too, like what Nan just touched on, I think is really significant, because as soon as you take empathy out of it, when you don't have to empathize, it gives you right to say, I don't care. So it gave them right to dismiss her work, as long as they could turn around and say, we're just dismissing this, where, you're crazy. Finally, you gave us reason to put the crazy label on you.
Right.
You don't have to empathize anymore. You're gone.
And I hate to say that she was asking for it, because that's a terrible thing to say. But as a person of her time, she was very unconventional. So it was easy for her to become a target. And it's just like they were just waiting in the wings, like you said, like how to get rid of her.
Yeah, she wasn't writing, lovely little domestic comedies or tragedies. She was out there doing men's work, doing science and doing investigations and writing whatever she wanted. Especially, I found that amazing, because I didn't know about the rest of her work at all. And the idea that she was one of the first people to have a woman detective. I mean, that's one of my addictions. It's mystery stories, and the idea of an early 19th century person is really interesting. And it just goes to show again that people were people then. We were all different kinds of intellectual ability and interests and things like that, and yet there were these incredibly strict divisions between what certain people could do and could not do. And she definitely was doing her own thing.
Right, absolutely. And it's great that people in the literary world are starting to take her seriously, and there's more feminist writing about her as well. So I'd like to see, like, in our field, some more writing about her. And it's just like you said, the mystery angle is really fun, because they have the Poe Award for like mystery writers, like, because he was like the first to have like a modern detective story, and that's not really true. It was the same year, but it was in April and it was a short story rather than Crowe's novel. So there are a lot of feminist writers that think the Poe Award should be changed to the Crowe Award. And don't get me wrong, I love Edgar Allan Poe.
That's a nice idea. That's a nice idea. Somebody said in the chat that a lot of these guys, Dickens and his pals, also piled on Poe as well. So we just have maybe a more immediate and more efficient cancellation culture that comes from social media, but they certainly were not sitting on their laurels. They were out there banging on people that they didn't want to have to compete with, that kind of thing. Well, listen, thank you so much. You guys were at the 2-hour mark, and like I said to Tim the other day, we don't want to completely destroy our speakers by making them stay for the entire day. So I haven't gotten any more questions in the chat, and I think this conversation has been really good. And I know all of us here with our faces and everybody in the group have really enjoyed what you've had to say.
Oh,
I
I'm so
wanted to say
glad.
before Lisette leaves the group, is that now that I know more about Catherine Crowe, before I just thought, well, this is an intellectual lady who was writing at her little table under the oil lamp. Now that I know all this other stuff about her, she just reminds me so much of Eileen Garrett and so much of Eleanor Sidgwick and Katherine Johnson and all these people that just followed that intellectual urge and did the best work they possibly could do. And it's wonderful to know this. I think Carlos knew this because he was constantly talking about how wonderful her book was and all that kind of stuff. But honest to God, yes, he was always interested in making sure that women in parapsychology were more understood and more talked about. And we have his digital papers and his paper papers that are around here. We have an entire thing of light. We have an entire thing of the Zoists. We have, all these.
Oh, wow.
Things that,
I gotta get in there. I want to see your library. I'm only an hour away.
You got to come and visit once I get it all off the floor. But he was really interested in all that. And yes, I know, I've heard that. But and he was multilingual too. He was always poking at me to learn German because that wasn't one of his languages, but he could read, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian besides.
Wow, I did not know that. That is.
And French,
yeah.
And
French too.
And French, yeah. He couldn't
What am I
exactly
doing? Nothing.
Lisette can speak it, and she speaks Greek too, but we, he would say, well, couldn't you so he finally co-opted Erlander Haraldson, who could speak absolutely everything and read whatever he couldn't say. So he did it that way, but he was always focused. And I think it was partly because his mother was a very, very strong personality and kind of lived her own life the way that she needed to do, and I think that helped a lot. But he was really interested in her, and I heard about it, and I was kind of proud of myself that I had actually read it already, but I didn't read it with the same depth of understanding as he did. So I've just loved this thing today. So before I get nutso and keep talking, I just wanted to say thank you again, you guys. And I need to kind of tell you what we're going to do next. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to share let me find what I did with my PowerPoint and I will share it again. I shouldn't do this before I click the share button. Okay, so we start with Allison, and then we're going to move over to Monday. And Monday is Pam Heath from Alameda, California, and how mind-matter interaction may play a role in creating place memory. It's at 3 p.m. Central, Chicago time on March 20th. That's Monday. And her abstract is parapsychologists have long been aware that the environment can sometimes appear to hold the memory of past events, which those sensitive to such information can know or re-experience. A literature review reveals that place memory originating events tend to fall into one of two very different categories. One category is a low emotion event that gets repeated over many years or centuries, while the other appears to originate from a one-time emotionally charged event. The latter category is particularly interesting as it would seem to have all of the experiential constituents we see in spontaneous mind-matter interaction. The talk will include a general discussion of place memory, the value of using phenomenology in parapsychology research, the constituents seen in mind-matter interaction, and her theory of its possible involvement in place memory. So I just want to invite you all to be sure that you come along and see that one as well. And it starts kind of that topic of place memory that will go on during the week. I'll be sending out a new Paramook newsletter tonight, and if not tonight, then early tomorrow morning, and that will give you everything that's going on this week, which is actually a pretty heavy week because now we've got Christopher Larson and Susan Demeter in the middle of it as well. And the other thing I wanted to say is this morning we picked up another 5 students, and so we're up to 136. And I haven't checked yet to see how many people have completed the course survey, but if you haven't done that, the link for that will be in the next Paramook newsletter. And thank you guys for everything. It's just been really wonderful. And thank you, Allison. You did a great
Good job, Allison.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great day,
Bye.
you guys.
See ya.
Bye.